Hans Wormhat. Today I want to look at the Anthrax hoax, the Anthrax letters. This came out right after 9/11. It's like in the ruins of 9/11. Boom, they hit you with another one. Then we got this anthrax scare. And it's just a perfect example of clown freak show psyop. And here we see anthrax gematria 32 and then 23. It's like mirror image numbers of one another in Pythagorean and Chaldean. And they like 32, they like 23. And I mean, two threes can be thought of as 33. 32 going on 33. I hear people say that pretty frequently. Like, I'm 32 years old going on 33. It's just, why would you ever say that? Well, they're into numbers, and that's why certain words they like better than others, because the gematria values. Anyways, let's just go through this and talk about all the hoax craft. And the big thing for this anthrax, much ado about nothing, they like to just freak out about stuff, and they can make up as many details as they want. And one of the things that happens a lot in their hoax events is they'll talk about hoax stuff. There will be for the mass shootings, they always have reports of additional shooters, and lo and behold, it ends up being just one or whatever. And they want you thinking anything except for there's no shooters. And I don't know, it just seems to be a big meme. This person became the victim of a hoax anthrax letter. They're all hoax anthrax letters. It kind of reminds me of how they'll put a obvious plushie chimp. They hand like an obvious plushie doll chimp to a nice looking chimp fursuit. I don't know. It's something that they do. They present you hoax versions of things because it somehow makes you believe that their other hoaxes are real. Oh, this one became a victim of a hoax anthrax letter, and somehow that justifies that the other ones are not hoaxes, but they're all hoaxes. This person also determined several stories wrote about the Iraq War were inaccurate. I mean, just this. I thought it was interesting. Uh, Miller defended her reporting, stating, "My job isn't to assess the government's information and be an independent intelligence analyst myself. My job is to tell readers of the New York Times what the government thought about Iraq's arsenal." I mean, basically they're saying it's not up to me to say the truth. I'm just going to write whatever. A zip code was misread. I don't know, things like this where the story is never normal and just makes sense, like how real life things make sense. A leads to B, which leads to C, and you're like, okay, that's a story. That's not how their hoaxes work. Their hoaxes all have a million little details and side tangents. Oh well, this person ended up getting sick because they misread a zip code. There will be things, about 9/11. How many stories out of 9/11? Oh, my cousin who worked in the trade center just so happened to get really bad food poisoning, and they were puking out their brains, and they called in sick that day. There's a million stories just like that. Conflicting news reports. One station will be talking about how there's two shooters. One station will be talking about how there's three shooters. There's never any, it's just chaos. I didn't know that this was a thing. I guess because I just wasn't paying attention. Apparently, a big aspect of this anthrax thing is all talking about whether the spores were weaponized or not with silica, which is glass, just sand. And a big part of this anthrax thing was it's just the experts going back and forth about, well, are the spores weaponized? Are they not weaponized? Very strange. This was just a 33 reference. At least 22 people developed anthrax infections, 11 of whom So 22, 11, 33. Oh, something about Greendale? Oh, that's coming up here. The envelopes addressed to Senators Deschelles and Leahy had a fictitious return address. 4th grade, Greendale School. There's no Greendale School. But look at Greendale. It's 44 in Pythagorean, and it's 33 in Chaldean. They really do go out of their way to pick names and that have these gematria values. They love the repetition, duality. 44 is destruction. So they really like that one for their hoax. Spooky stories. You see 44 a lot. And of course 33. Hoax letters. False positives. This is just something that they do. You eventually realize that all of these stories are so similar because the same people are writing them and they're using the same tactics. Why are there always reports of multiple shooters that turn out to be false? Why are there always so many false leads? You never hear about just like, oh, and then we found the guy and that was it, and their motives were clear, and it's never like that because they have to paint just this huge story about it. Think of just how produced the O.J. Simpson trial. So produced, it was just a play for the people. If the O.J. Simpson trial was real, they wouldn't have had that huge Bronco chase. It was theater. You're watching theater. There's just all these strange side things. A pink powder, a Star of David pendant, and a handwritten letter to Jennifer Lopez. The writer said how much just all these side details. If something like this really happened, if they really confiscated an envelope that they thought was connected to this, and it ended up being just some strange fan letter to Jennifer Lopez with a Star of David pendant inside, do you think that would be just known news? Do you think that they would feel the need to tell everybody about that? It's like, why are we being given this detail? They just mesmerize people with strange details. Radiocarbon dating established that the anthrax cultured was no more than 2 years before. I've never ever heard of people allegedly using radiocarbon dating for a time frame as short as 2 years. This is nonsense. Radiocarbon dating is nonsense. They love to mix their hoaxes together. What it is, I mean, here's what it is. These stories that they come out with, it's kind of like a free-for-all. And that's why there's so much chaos. That's why there's so much conflicting stories, because every tranny out there wants a piece of the tranny pie, and they want to get their spin of the story. I think of it as being the same thing as Jack the Ripper. How come there's so much information out there about Jack the Ripper? It's because there's been hundreds of trannies out there that want to get their own piece of the pie, that they want to write their own little details into it. That's why they can. Let me just give you an example. Nobody would bat an eye if in a month from now somebody wrote an article, new victim of Jack the Ripper found, and they would just say something like, documents uncovered in abandoned library in London finds records of, see where I'm getting at? They can always come up with new details because they're just writing them in. There was a big thing about silicone being added to the anthrax. 7 years later, they like to just throw out 7. I believe I made an honest mistake. He had been overly impressed by what he thought he saw under the microscope. There will be people, oh, just kidding. Like, why is there so much incompetence? Have you noticed that all sorts of experts out there, that it's because that's like a meme of the experts being useless and wrong and liars, but then at the same time you're supposed to believe the experts for everything. It's like a power play that they like to have, where they show you that the experts are constantly lying and they don't know what they're doing, but at the same time your opinion's wrong because you're not an expert. They bring in their other hoaxes. And I'm telling you that this is probably just some tranny out there that wants a piece of this tranny pie. They just make a absurd claim where they say, hey, there might be, and they can just write an article that says, one expert claims that there might be smallpox in this sample. And then who knows whether the media is going to pick up on that or not. And you see that sometimes the media will pick up on something like that. Oh, yeah, there is smallpox. Or sometimes they'll just drop it off and the media will say, nope, no smallpox. We need to know if the powder is. Oh, look at this. I thought this was really telling. Jarling met whatever Ezel in a hallway and said in a loud voice, do you know why it was in a loud voice? Because they absolutely wanted the people around them to hear. This is how they plant their little, this is just a psyop. I'm going to go have a conversation with you and loudly say, blaspheme, John, we need to know if the powder is laced with smallpox. They could have taken this person off to the side and said it quietly. They said it really loud on purpose because they're just trying to start a rumor. High school never ends. It really doesn't. They just start rumors. Every baffo tranny out there wants to get a piece of the pie. They want to say, hey, my cousin got a letter that had anthrax in it, right? You've been around these people your whole life. They never grow out of it. It's just that they get illuminated into positions of authority, and then you start believing their lies. Got to look for the smallpox and a milky white liquid from a field test done by the FBI's Hazardous Materials Response Unit. I think that's like a gross sex joke. Liquid chemicals were then used to deactivate the spores. They just write, honestly, a lot of times I look at this stuff and I'm like, these are the same people that write for Star Trek. They're just writing sci-fi nonsense. When scientists turned up the power on the electron beam of the transmission, this is the tranny mission to do all these hoaxes. Transmission electron microscope. The spores began to ooze. Look, it's straight out of a movie. Whoa, Jarling muttered, hunched over the eyepiece. Something was boiling off the spores. This is clearly bad stuff, he said. This was not your mother's anthrax. See, who is writing this? It's bad. The spores had something in them, an additive, perhaps. Could this material have come from a national bioweapons program? From Iraq? Did Al-Qaeda have anthrax capability that was this good? Stay tuned for the next installment, where we write up whatever BS answer we want to. Additives. I didn't know this, but I guess that this was like a huge thing. I guess that they just spent most of their time talking about whether or not there were additives in the anthrax. Find out if the powder contained any metals or elements. The energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer. There were 2 extra elements in the spores, silicone and oxygen. Powdered glass or silica. It had looked like fried egg. Oops. It had looked like fried egg gunk dripping off the spores. Show us the images. Where's your images? All you're doing is talking. People can say anything, right? Anybody can say anything. If you don't, where's your pictures? This sounds very interesting. You're a scientist. Where are the pictures? Usually you just get this, just words, junk. Fried egg gunk. And they like to talk about eggs. I think that it's just like a satanic reference. I know that seems silly, but it's eggs, sulfur. They like to talk about eggs when it's just not. You don't have to. Contradictions. It's just full of contradictions. 2 experts say the anthrax was altered. And then they'll just go back and forth, back and forth. You guys have seen YouTube inverts do this, where they like fake drama with one another to go back and forth, back and forth. All of the things that they use in their psyops, trannies use it in their day-to-day lives to do the same thing because they know it works. If they can get people yelling back and forth, yes, they're weaponized, no, they're not weaponized, yes, they're weaponized, no, they're not weaponized, that's good. That's good drama for them. And it makes people keep buying into the story. That's how they can drag these stories out for years and years and years. It's like there's never any conclusion to them. They always keep the end open. It's like when you go to see a movie and at the end they leave it with a cliffhanger because they know that they're going to do a part 2. That's how these tranny operations go. And they always want you to think that this stuff is so easily done, even though it's a hoax. For instance, I'll just give you the example that somebody I know always likes to bring up, and I should bring it up more often. You know that book about allegedly the Boy Scout or whatever that makes a nuclear reactor using microwaves? Okay, if it's so easy that a high schooler can do it, if it's so easy a Boy Scout can do it, show us how you did it and, walk us through it. It's the same thing people tell me all the time. I have a background in science, mathematics. People tell me all the time, oh, you can prove that the earth is round using elementary trigonometry. And I tell them I understand elementary trigonometry. Why don't you walk me through it? Do you know how often they take me up on it and walk me through it? They never do. They just like disappear. So uh, they like to just tell you, oh, anybody could do it. Just like, oh, some Boy Scout can make a nuclear reactor out of a microwave. Okay, prove it. This person saying a lone individual, not any, but a lone individual could have created the spores for as little as $2,500, which is 2 5 is a 7. They're just throwing a 7 at you. Prove it. Prove that somebody can make anthrax spores for $2,500. I'm getting okay. So there was this big. Most of this stuff was talking about whether it was weaponized or not. A diabolical advance in biological weapons technology. False reports of bentonite. So what this is just some pseudo journalist out there gets the bright idea. I want to connect the anthrax to 9/11, to Saddam Hussein. So they just concoct some rumor and they toss it out there. And I think that they test the waters whether or not they're going to run with it. The media is either going to say, oh, yeah, there is bentonite, or they're going to drop it and say they were wrong. And this one, I guess, got dropped. Just talking over and over about the silica. Strange things about the silica. 1.4, they like to throw out 14 a lot. It's a 7/7. 14 is double 7. And just more intrigue. They just like to have intrigue. Strange things that don't really have an answer. They're talking so much about silica content of this anthrax. It's like you kind of even forget why you're here. Like, why are we even here? There were 17 FBI agents and 10 postal inspectors assigned to the case. 27, so 17 and 10 is 27. 27 is a number you see a lot. You know the 27 club for celebrities dying at 27? It's because it's a 33 reference. 27 is 3 cubed. 3 times 3 times 3. It's 27. This is another meme. Anthrax archive destroyed. Have you noticed this? And you start to just put the pieces together. Okay, this is no longer just a coincidence. Why is it so frequent that you find out, oh, everything relevant is destroyed? Isn't that a big thing for NASA? That NASA allegedly destroyed all sorts of stuff dealing with the moon landings. They do it with their hoaxes. If they tell you that they destroyed a bunch of stuff, well then when you say, well, where's your evidence? It was destroyed. Well, how convenient. Yeah, people try to connect it to Afghanistan, I guess. Talking about vaccines. Look, this is aerosol physics, not biology. They're blinding you with science. They're talking about hidden codes. This is something that is a big red flag. Talking about hidden messages. They tell you the truth in plain sight, that they hide messages. Like gematria is one way that they hide their code. Hidden message. Another random thing. I was just going through. It's like there wasn't already enough just random side tangents about this stuff. The paper is largely based on a high level of tin detected in tests of the mailed anthrax. Where did tin? This just comes out of nowhere. Reminds me of Tin Man, Wizard of Oz. They can come up with anything and just throw it out there. And if you're a Masonic tranny, then I mean, if you're a normal human and you try to come up with your own crackpot theory and throw it out there, that nobody's going to give you the time of day in the media. But if you know how to pull some strings, you can get your own little theory out there and see if they're going to pick up on it. They get a lot of money out of these hoaxes. They get to reconstruct buildings. This is a big part of their hoaxes, is that they get a ton of money for reconstructing buildings. Huge amount of cleanup costs. Here's another 27, which is 3 raised to the third power. 3 cubed. Total damage exceeded 1 billion. They make tons of money off of these things. But, I mean, they get to print the money anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But they get to use these hoaxes as an explanation for why they do these huge reconstruction projects. Lingering health problems, including fatigue, shortness of breath, and memory loss. Memory loss is a huge reoccurring theme in their hoaxes. Memory loss, people getting amnesia, people saying it felt like a dream, people saying things like it still doesn't feel real. You need to look out for stuff like that. The case has been referenced 7 times on the police procedural crime drama, Criminal Minds. This article on the anthrax thing has, I'm going to end with this idea. The article on this anthrax thing has 185 references. It is such a long article. It's out of control. But then if you go to the article on gravity, there's only 53 references for gravity. Their hoax stories get filled with so much fluff, and a lot of times they're like hoax science stuff. They give you nothing. Like only 53 references for gravity, and yet this anthrax scare, which has probably been, most people haven't thought about this in a long time, I imagine, because they just drop it eventually. This thing has 185. It just shows to me they like to fluff up their hoax stories, and when it comes to hard-hitting science stuff, they just quietly say their opinion and then just like that's the end of it. I just always find it interesting which articles are really big, which articles are really small compared to what I think they should be. Okay, so that's it for this. Hope you guys enjoyed. God bless everyone.